yesterday's, you were all there, of course, I hope, yesterday's talk by Rancière. And incidentally, I always liked this Hegelian systematizing. Did you notice how Badiou, me, Rancière, how we formed a very nice classical philosophical triad? You know, this triad of, to put it in religious terms, the true, the good, the beautiful, or in Kantian terms, pure reason, practical reason, aesthetic judgment. But you was doing pure reason, ontology, logic. I was doing politics, practical. Rancière was doing aesthetics. So we were a nice philosophical trio. No? Did you? This morning I had a brief conversation with, and we talked about how, you know, that Rancière likes westerns by Anthony Mann. Yeah, it's even translated in one of his English books now, his wonderful essay on Anthony Mann. And now I was asking, because the other candidate for me is Delmer Days, but okay, let's go on to more serious stuff. Let me tell you, well, where I thought he will agree with me, but he didn't. And I'm still not sure with what. You remember that wonderful vision of, and it worked very well, it did the impossible. I noticed that some of you wanted to applaud me also. Namely, you think Hitchcock is unbeatable. But it worked so nice, the Dziga Vertov clips, no? That they, far from being overshadowed by the Hitchcock clips, it worked almost better. Okay, but first, I see some nonetheless dark moments in it. I verified it yesterday evening on Wikipedia and so on. That, as I hinted yesterday, Vertov was member of that, how should I call it, Gnostic materialist mechanic movement, which was not a kind of a freakish, marginal movement, but the most popular form of collective ideology, hundreds of thousands of people participating in it throughout the 20s in the Soviet Union. It was a kind of it really points towards today's so-called technological gnosis. The idea was that man is a deficient being with regard to machines, and that the future should be to make ourselves totally disponible to ourselves biologically, to make us totally reproducible without sexuality. Sexuality was for them the last vestige of the bourgeois ideology and so on, and to turn us into machines. The model was precisely, man is not a well-made machine. I quote in my Defense of Lost Causes book, even Trotsky has one wonderfully arrogant statement where he says the next big task of the Bolshevik movement is to reconstruct man. And he says openly, first we must study biologically and, as Trotsky puts it, and also that part of neuronal biology which is usually called psychology. And then we must reconstruct man so that, it's a wonderful rhetorical ending, so that we can then say, goodbye Homo sapiens. You did your work, now we need something higher, and so on. And so that this idea totally with today's tech gnosis, that science is enabling us today to reach immortality. They already had this dream, which is today the dream of digital immortality, you know, that you change our personal identity into software, which can then be reproduced, copied from one to another hardware, and in this way you have immortality. It was really a kind of a metaphysical dream, which was extremely, I emphasize this wasn't a couple of freaks. This was hundreds of thousands, extremely important, and again, Vertov was part of that. His reliance on camera was precisely that the problem of humans, machines, is that they are less reliable than camera. What was very interesting here was that this mechanical, however you call them, mechanic utopias, got connected with Pavlovian, this conditional reflex psychology, and they developed an entire theory ferociously against sexuality. That sexuality is that, as Rancière put yesterday, that moment of distability, fascination, which disturbs this blissful plurality of the flow of life, so they tried to demonstrate even physiologically that sexuality, that from the standpoint of the health of the organism, sexuality is as such pathological. And now comes the nice point of irony. This is how it was in 24-25 in Russia. They were so aggressive, looking for the support of Pavlov, that Trotsky, he was here a good guy, who was for Freud. Trotsky, on behalf of the Bolshevik oppressor, wrote a desperate letter to Pavlov, trying to convince him, give Freud a chance, perhaps, nonetheless. So, you see, far from being oppressed, no, psychoanalysis was, how to put it, officially supported by the early Bolsheviks and so on. But I want to say, what I want to say is that this was an extremely strong, strong tendency. What should interest you is also, what was their view of psychology? They had literal plans to turn humans into machines. One of their theorists said that emotions are something outdated, that man should become like a machine where, for example, you know how a machine, if the machine gets too hot, it doesn't cry. Just, you have a measure which shows you what's the temperature. That we should develop the same functionalization of emotions. Emotions are just a wrongly confused way for an organism to measure its malfunctioning. We should replace emotions,
There's a great novel that was written exactly at that time by someone from within the system. It's the best science fiction novel.
You mean this Zamyatin? But I know this one. But you know also others which are the big hero of now. He is discovered as the greatest classic. I think he was Andrei Platonov. He also did in the Chevengur and so on. He was also member of this, how to put it, anti-sexual utopia. Now we come to the shock, on which I rely a lot in my book, that this is how paradoxically we should understand Stalin's popularity. Stalin ideologically meant a break with this crazy utopia and a return to common sense. Because Stalin's message was, which is why when Stalin introduced socialist realism, it was so immensely popular. No? Stalin's message was, enough of this stupid, like what you saw yesterday, formalist experiments. We need stories where people will cry, identify, and so on. Even horrible as it may sound, the Stalinist show trials can be read as some kind of return to traditional morality, because the line of this radical utopian Gnostic Bolsheviks was that culpability is a bourgeois notion. Or if you are a criminal, we should treat you as a machine which malfunctioned. And it's not a question of, you don't punish a machine. You either destroy it if it's runs too bad, or reconstruct it. And they strictly insisted that that's how you should. So the very, paradoxically, that's the cruel irony. The very idea of punishment, show trials, paradoxically brought back this, although, I'm not an idiot, it was all a fake, I know. But formally, it brought back the idea of we are responsible, ethical subjects, responsible for what we do, and we should be punished for that. No, it's a things, how to put it, I think that the history of the Soviet Union is very complex, and the 20s are still the enigma. You cannot simply play the game of, the good early time, and what happens. Okay, but let's not get lost in it. What I want to do is, can I imply something that you all know? Vertigo. We are in a civilized society. No, I hope. This is how I treated my small son. I told him, listen, you should stick to the great values of Western civilization. He asked me, what does this mean? Then I told him, if you know the difference between King Oedipus and Oedipus et Colonus, that's bullshit, that's your problem. If you don't know the difference between first and second version of Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much,